Empiezas tú con la primera pregunta, ¿no?
Good morning.
Good morning.
¿Qué es cierto y qué no en cómo llevó su biografía a la pequeña pantalla? La serie describe una fuerte vigilancia, pero todo esto es peor de lo que aún se describe. It's worse in the
What is true and what is reality in the Netflix series about your life? Because the series describes strong surveillance and oppression, your persecution and threats when you left New York for Berlin. Is all as Netflix says, or there are more things?
Well, actually, the Netflix series was created by two female Jewish writers who, in a sense, tried to convert the material of Unorthodox as a book into something that works on a screen, something that is cinematic. And that was a challenge, especially because stories of writers are always very challenging to translate to the screen, because the stories of writers take place largely in their heads. You cannot show thoughts in the cinema. The cinema needs action. And so there was a lot of consulting about how does one show the experience of threat. In my case, nobody chased me to Berlin in real life. I stayed in America for 5 more years, and then I moved to Berlin. But in the US, I was subject to constant death threats, very often via the post or email. I had many experiences that were uncomfortable, where I felt people were following me or watching me. And in a sense, to create a representation of this for the cinema, the storyline of the cousin, Moshe, who follows Esti, the main character to Berlin, was created to, in a sense, represent these experiences. Most people who leave these communities describe being intimidated, being followed, being threatened, being manipulated, and so on. And the job of the series was to condense these experiences into representational narratives, which I think the series did very well. But the series does not pretend to be anything other than a fictionalized adaptation of my book. One might notice, especially from the scenes that are created as flashbacks, as memories from the past, these are very, very loyal to the original text of the book. Often the dialogue is word for word from the book. And then as soon as the series switches back to the present in Berlin, it takes much more liberties and becomes rather inspired by events in the book. A very good example of this is the scene in the Netflix series where Esti eats pork for the first time and expects to vomit. She's in a cafe in Berlin talking to her music professor. In my case, I was in a cafe in New York talking to my college classmate. But the experience that one has when one breaks a rule for the first time and expects to be punished and then is not punished, this experience comes in the Netflix series just like in the book, but in a way that is more cinematic, in a way that fits the cinematic narrative. And I think this is the essential difference between cinema and books, is that books aim to explore an internal experienced truth, and the cinema aims to explore a kind of visual external truth, and hopes, in a sense, to inspire the viewers to experience internal truth through the translation. Yeah.
Too much.
Yeah, I speak a lot.
Bueno, Netflix, la serie en Netflix fue hecha por 2 mujeres judías que convirtieron el libro en algo más que el libro para hacerlo cinematográfico. Una parte, porque una parte estaba en la cabeza de ella, eran sus pensamientos, y eso no se podía visualizar en el cine, ¿no? Porque, por ejemplo, entre las diferencias que hay, entre las diferencias que están en el libro, que no son de mi vida, es que yo estuve 5 años más en Nueva York antes de irme a Berlín. Y por eso parte de la historia que grabaron pues son escenas que aparentemente son en un café de Berlín, pero realmente son escenas en las que yo estaba en un café de Nueva York, ¿no? Básicamente estoy contenta porque el libro, la serie es representativa del libro, lo que pasa es que se adapta al lenguaje audiovisual. O sea que es una ficción adaptada de lo que yo realmente viví. Pero a veces en el cine también hay diálogos que sí que los cogen palabra por palabra de mi libro y otras cosas que no. Entonces al final las cosas que son ficción pues están basadas en mi propia realidad y al final está bien. Hubo mucho contacto entre nosotros, entre las dos mujeres judías que escribían la historia y yo, que era quien la estaba contando, y quedé muy contenta con la serie.
De hecho, esa escena en la que se sumerge en la playa vestida por completo y que se transmite una especie de liberación por su parte, es real, ocurrió así, se quitó la peluca en el agua, when you were swimming in the beach.
I understand the question. So, no, I did not take off my wig when I went swimming in the beach. Again, this is a really good example of how does one tell the story of the moment of liberation in a way that translates into cinematic impact. And in this case, that is, a scene of great impact. But in real life, I simply decided one day to take it off on the way to college classes, and similar to the story with the pork, there is a sense of I will be punished, and then the punishment does not come, and then in a sense more and more steps are taken to liberate oneself because the fear of punishment is dissolved. The story of Este's bathing in the beach is actually designed to be a parallel to the story of the ritual bath. Because the ritual bath is a tradition for women in Orthodox communities that after they menstruate, they must purify themselves. And the assumption is that the woman is rendered unclean by menstruation and therefore is in need of being cleansed. And in the case of the beach, in a way, Este is seen as having cleansed herself also of these ideas. So it's not just about the wig, but it's also about what kind of meanings bathing can have in different contexts. And so she's also immersing herself in water, but it has a different meaning. It's not about her body being controlled, but rather she's controlling her body and her fate. In my case, bathing in public was something that took a long time because it was new and uncomfortable for me. And I don't often go in the water. Now in Tenerife, I went in for the first time, I think, in my life without a bathing suit for the first time in my life. So these things, yeah, because Las Gaviotas, it's
Okay.
playa nudista, exactly. So why not? Nobody was there. It was early in the morning.
Okay.
Yeah. So the idea is that these things that are shown in the series that happen so fast, in real life, if you speak to people who leave these communities, they will tell you that these are very long processes of losing fear and feeling free. They don't happen because you jump in the water one time, but it happens over many, many years and you make small steps. But with cinema, you cannot show this. So it must be dramatic and it must be quick.
No, lo de la playa realmente no fue así. Ese, por ejemplo, es un buen ejemplo de cómo convertir una situación en mi vida que se hizo cinematográfica, ¿no? Era como, yo estaba amenazada con que iba a llegarme un castigo y el castigo no llegaba y cada día me fui sintiendo más libre y así fue cada día. Y esto yo lo relacioné mucho con una tradición que tienen los judíos ortodoxos, que es de un baño ritual que se hace cuando las mujeres llegan a la pubertad y tienen la regla. Pero en este caso era un baño al revés, era un baño de libertad. Y así se visualizaba mucho mejor en el cine, viéndome a mí como me metía en la playa. Pero con un significado totalmente diferente a lo que ocurría en el mundo judío, ¿no? Bañarme en público me llevó muchísimo tiempo porque no me sentía cómoda y ahora por primera vez en Tenerife, en la playa de las Gaviotas, pues me desnudé y me bañé completamente desnuda y fue una sensación especial, porque esto todo ha sido un proceso muy largo en el tiempo para mí, pero bueno, que ha valido la pena.
En este sentido, de todas las prohibiciones a la mujer, desde la vestimenta hasta no cantar en público, por ejemplo, ¿cuál era la que más le molestaba? Which prohibition was the worst for you?
I think if we look closely at all of these prohibitions, of these concrete prohibitions around dress or behavior, they're actually representative of one central prohibition, which is women's ability to decide their own lives, because in a sense, every decision is made for them. What they wear is a decision that's made for them, and how loudly they speak is a decision that's made for them. And so essentially it boils down to this experience from when you are very young of knowing that women have less right to decide over themselves. And so I think when I think what is worst, it is this experience of not being able to decide. Because I think in the end of the day, it's not about the clothing. It's not about, there are days when I still wear the same clothing as before, but it doesn't matter because I decided. And so it really is about taking away one's freedom of decision from a young age. This is very much against human nature. And this is what feels like a prison, knowing that you will never be able to make a decision.
Ok. Realmente me molestaban todas las prohibiciones, pero la central era decidir sobre mi propia vida en todos esos sentidos. Cuando eres muy joven, te molestaba eso, no poder decidir, igual que puede molestar a cualquier otra chica o joven del mundo. Pero no era sobre la ropa ni sobre lo que podía decir o no, sino eso, sobre poder decidir. Por ejemplo, ahora me he visto de manera similar a como me vestía antes, pero ahora soy yo quien decide cómo se viste.
Usted fue criada por sus abuelos, los supervivientes del Holocausto, que no nacieron en aquella comunidad. Precisamente eso la ayudó a ser más crítica o rebelde.
I don't think it's because of my grandparents per se that I was more critical, but it's possible to say that because my grandparents was of the generation of founding members, they had a connection to a world before this community. And at the same time, because I had a parent who had left the community, my grandparents raised me because my mother left, there was, in a sense, in my family story, a model for becoming a critical member and leaving. So I think there were many factors at play that caused me to be critical. And of course, the fact that I had a strong relationship with my grandmother, the fact that I could engage in conversation with her that felt authentic and sincere, I think helped me develop a more critical spirit. But also I think sometimes people are just born this way. I think I was born to be critical.
Yes, you are like that.
I think so, yeah. I'm born in August.
Bueno, no solamente mis abuelos son los que tuvieron una conexión con el mundo de fuera antes de dejar esa comunidad, sino que ya mi madre, también fue crítica y dejó la comunidad antes que incluso mis abuelos. Pero realmente todos ellos me ayudaron y al final, en realidad, he descubierto que nací para ser crítica.
Antes hablaba de la incapacidad para decidir y aumentan los hombres, quizás porque también les es más sencillo, que abandonan este tipo de comunidades, que huyen de las comunidades ultraortodoxas. Al final todos, hombres y mujeres, son víctimas de la manipulación y de la falta de libertad.
Yes, I would argue that both men and women have their freedom of, I would say, to decide their own lives taken away from them at an early age. It's interesting, though, men are compensated more for this loss of freedom. So men are given small, limited freedoms. Above all, they are given rights to dominate over women as a compensation for not having true freedom. So in a sense, they are given the illusion of freedom and that they are able to decide the fate of their wives and of their children. But actually, they are not free to decide their own fate. They are only free to decide within their own microcosmos of the family, and only to a point, until the rabbi intervenes or until an elder intervenes. As a result, there is a strong tendency, like in all communities that exist in hierarchies of control, there is a tendency for people at different positions in the hierarchy to abuse people who are lower in the hierarchy as an expression of frustration with the people who are above them. So in a sense, all anger at those who have more power is directed at those who have less power. And women and children are at the bottom of this hierarchy. And so they are the most frequent recipients of this abuse. I believe that in the case of people who are leaving, it's very interesting to observe that the majority of people who leave these communities are men. So it's really 95%. And there are thousands and thousands of people who have left by now. The age of the internet made this possible. There are, of course, women who leave, but it's more frequent in the cases of women that they are single and childless because it's easier. And so when you look at the narratives by men and women who leave, it's often the case that men will speak of a crisis of faith. They will say, I stopped believing and I couldn't live a lie. But women will very rarely speak of these crises of faith in regards to leaving. They will speak of feeling not safe. They will speak of feeling like they cannot protect their children, or they will not be able to protect the children they will have. They speak about physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. And then the issue of faith comes after they leave. And they ask themselves, do I still believe in God now that I have left the community? But they leave the violent structures, whereas the men, they leave the faith. And I think this is interesting because it shows you that what the men find most oppressive is the lie of religious control. And what the women find most oppressive is the result of that religious control, which is often male violence.
Sí, ambos géneros no tienen libertad. Ninguno de los géneros, ni los hombres ni las mujeres, teníamos libertad para decidir. Pero ellos tenían menos problemas porque, aunque solo sea en el microcosmos de las familias que formaban, ya estaban por encima de la libertad de las mujeres y de los niños. Y si además formaban parte de la jerarquía de la comunidad, en cuanto más alto estuvieran en la jerarquía, pues más libres se sentían o menos constreñidos en su vida. Cuanto más poder tienes, mejor es tu vida. Pero curiosamente, como todos sabemos, pues igual que en otras partes del mundo, en la pirámide de la jerarquía, los que están más abajo siempre son las mujeres y los niños, ¿no? Lo que ha ocurrido es que lo que vemos es que el 95% de las personas que dejan la comunidad son hombres. Y ellos lo hacen fundamentalmente por una crisis de fe, porque dejan de creer en Dios o dejan de creer en la religión judía. En el caso de las mujeres va mucho más allá. Las mujeres que abandonan suelen ser no estar casadas ni tener hijos, no como en mi caso, que ya estaba casada y tenía un hijo, y además lo hacen porque no pueden proteger a sus hijos, porque no pueden protegerse, porque sufren dentro de ese microcosmos de cada familia. Ya no solamente sufren lo que la comunidad les impide hacer, sino que sufrimos dentro del microcosmos una violencia sexual, una violencia física y una violencia de todo tipo, porque no tenemos ni el más mínimo poder. Pero sigue siendo mucho más difícil para las mujeres dejarlo que para los hombres. Yo me habré olvidado de cosas, pero bueno,
es que... Deborah, usted ha firmado con cientos de intelectuales una carta denunciando la complicidad del gobierno alemán con lo que estaba ocurriendo en Gaza. Se ha vuelto una voz incómoda, an uncomfortable voice, para su país y para los judíos. Incluso un periodista llegó a fantasear, lo dijo, con que jamás se la llevara a usted como rehén. ¿Recibe amenazas de ambos lados? ¿Cómo convive con eso? How's your life with this?
Yeah, I understand. So actually, in Germany, in the last a year or so, since the 7th of October, the only threats I have really received have come from the right wing. So in the beginning, it was from right-wing Jews or from people who were right-wing who felt like a philo-Semitic affinity with Jews or who are obsessed with Jews. And as I have become more critical, I have gotten something which is actually quite common in Germany, threats from people claiming to be police. And this is something that has happened before because there's a lot of right-wing infiltration of the police and the security apparatus. I am uncomfortable.
Explain the police, what did you say?
People who claim to be police send me death threats. And it's very uncertain because there is a long history in Germany of police finding the information of individuals that they don't agree with and persecuting them. And there have been many right-wing conspiracies within police and the security apparatus that have been discovered, but they're not able to fix the problem in Germany because the system is so completely, in a sense, overwhelmed by right-wing actors that even if you fire a few people that you catch, there are hundreds of people left. And so the newspapers in Germany very frequently report that there is a big problem of right-wing and neo-Nazi people within state security, but they're not able to fix this problem. And so it's common in Germany if one is a left-wing person or if one is a minority person, so for example, Turkish or Muslim, or if one is politically critical and uncomfortable, that there will be threats threats from the right wing, and many of these right-wing people have access to the police databases, they have access to power, and they can find you. And we've had political murders in Germany very frequently as a result. So my threats come from these people claiming to be these parties, and as a result, I'm very cautious, and I have hidden my information and so on. And I have private security that helps me actually for free because they show solidarity. I am uncomfortable in Germany because I am the first very loud voice from, in a sense, the progressive American Jewish community. After the wall fell, many Jewish people started to move to Germany, especially to Berlin, by getting the passports of their grandparents. The same thing happened with Israelis. A lot of progressive and left-wing Israelis started to move to Germany after the wall fell. And so what happened was these tremendous progressive Jewish communities suddenly starts to form within Germany, but they are not seen and they are not heard. They do not become members of the official Jewish community, the one that is paid by the government to the tune of 27 million euros a year, because this community is too conservative for them and consists largely of Jews of Soviet background and German converts from Christianity. And they are very controlling and strict about what you're allowed to do in this community. So the Israelis and the Americans and the South Africans, the British, the French Jews, they all stay out of this community, but they exist. They form their own communities. But until now, nobody heard them. Nobody knew that they are there. And whenever the German media wanted to say what Jewish people in Germany think, they would ask the official right-wing conservative Jewish community that is paid by the German government to, in a sense, support everything the government does. I am the first real exception in that I'm a very well-known person, not just in Germany, but beyond. And I speak on behalf of these communities. And they want to deny that these communities exist. Of course, it's impossible to do it. International media reports extensively on what progressive Jewish people think about what is happening in Gaza, and often the most critical, the loudest, most critical voices on what is happening in Gaza are coming from Jews. They're coming from American Jews, British Jews, French Jews, and so on. In Germany, this is new. Nobody forced this opinion into the media until now. And there is a lot of anger because there is a real fear of the shifting balance of power. The Central Council of Jews in Germany loses enormous amounts of members every year, mostly because their members are elderly and they are dying, and the young people don't want to be a part of it. So many young people who are even growing up in conservative Jewish homes, they are breaking away from their parents, breaking away from their communities, and starting their own progressive communities. This is really scary because to be part of the official Jewish community, it's to have access to millions and millions of euros of government support and a lot of influence and a lot of power, and they don't want to lose this. They don't want to share it with us. And so there is a battle happening. And I think this is it's healthy, it's positive, it's a part of change. But before we will see real progression in Germany in this issue, we will see very dramatic regression, which is always the response, based out of a fear of loss of control. But of course, this fear of loss of control, it's something I know from my own life, the way that people react when they are afraid. And this fear, it causes them to behave in ways that are counterproductive. For example, my community, when it's afraid of losing control, it becomes more controlling, and then it loses even more people. So now there are thousands of people who left after I left because the community became even stricter. And so in a sense, the reaction of the Central Council of Jews, the reaction of right-wing conservative Jews in attacking us and threatening us and saying they hope that we will be hostages in Gaza, they hope that we will be raped by Hamas, this is not working for them in the long run. But it will work in the short term. And I think the good thing about people like me is I always think in the long term. When I first published Unorthodox, it was very controversial in the US. And 10 years later, it's completely mainstream. And I think the same thing will be with these views in Germany. They are very controversial now, and in 10 years, they will be mainstream. And this is the battle.
Yeah. Similar to the first 20th century.
Yes.
Okay. Lo que tengo que decir es que sí, efectivamente soy una voz muy incómoda en Alemania. En el último año se nota en Alemania que la derecha está subiendo de una manera increíble y que cada día es mayor su influencia. Y por supuesto esta influencia se nota en contra de los judíos, ¿no? Incluso hay policías que me han enviado amenazas porque no están de acuerdo con mi forma de pensar y de expresarme en libertad. El sistema alemán es muy cerrado y protege a estos policías, aunque sean neonazis, Y si eres de una minoría, incluso dentro de los propios judíos o exjudíos, pues ellos te amenazan más, ¿no? Y todo esto también se amplía porque los partidos de derechas también se sienten con más libertad de amenazarte. Por eso tengo la necesidad de tener seguridad privada, que me la pago yo en Alemania, ¿no? Y estoy ahora muy incómoda en Alemania, mientras que cuando llegué no era así. Hace 4 o 5 años la situación en Berlín era totalmente diferente. Y lo que tengo que decir también es que mucha gente más llegó como yo, con el pasaporte de sus abuelos puedes hacerte europeos y en este caso alemanes, que todos emigraron después de la Segunda Guerra Mundial. Así que hay muchos como yo, pero durante mucho tiempo no se nos veía y no se nos oía. Veníamos desde el background del mundo soviético o desde el background de haber emigrado a Alemania o de otros lugares y estábamos allí y hasta ahora nadie lo sabía, pero ahora sí lo saben. Entonces ha empezado un gran problema para nosotros como comunidad y como yo soy muy conocida, pues realmente soy una de las primeras voces, si no la primera, que he hablado de esta comunidad, de toda esta gente que existe, estos miles de personas, y también la primera que ha hablado sobre lo que está ocurriendo en Gaza y un poco en contra de, de esa guerra, ¿no? Esto es nuevo en Alemania y lo que ha generado es, por un lado, la reacción que comentaba de la derecha y luego ha generado en nosotros mucho miedo. Porque todos estos judíos o exjudíos que han llegado a Alemania después de muchos periplos por el mundo, muchos de ellos tienen mucho poder y además tienen muchísimo dinero del gobierno y no quieren perderlo. Pero ante esta regresión dramática lo que está pasando es que muchos jóvenes están rompiendo con esas comunidades y se están marchando. Y miles de personas como yo, ante el miedo que está empezando a crecer, vemos cómo las comunidades se cierran más sobre ellas mismas, empiezan a ejercer más control también sobre sus propios miembros y por eso miles de personas están dejando, no solamente las comunidades, sino también el país. Y ella piensa siempre en el largo plazo y cree que esto va a ir a peor, que dentro de 10 años estaremos pues probablemente como estuvimos en una época a finales de los años 30 del siglo XX.
We are finishing, but ¿cree usted que ahora con las elecciones en apenas unos meses, en febrero, la ultraderecha suba y quizás todo se vuelva más hostil hacia usted? ¿Puede acabar decidiendo marcharse o incluso ser deportada?
The far right already has a lot more power than one might realize, even if they're not in the government. They are behind almost all of the actions and resolutions, the way that they instrumentalize the issue of Israel and German guilt to force all of the German political parties and all of the parties within government to enact, in a sense, authoritarian limits on democracy is a sign that, in a sense, they already are in power. The new resolution about the protection of Jewish life and this concentrates all responsibility for anti-Semitism on Muslims, on a sense of foreign imported influence. And so in the name of Jews, the far right can then demand that Muslims are deported, that immigration is curtailed, and so on. In this case of deportation, it's interesting that now within these resolutions, there are these clauses that say that citizenship can be revoked in the case of anti-Semitism. And then anti-Semitism in Germany is often defined simply as criticism of Israel. Very often when I go to demonstrations and I speak about the actions of the Israeli government and I criticize them, in the newspapers, they will then write that I question the right of Israel to exist, although I never say in a sentence this because it's such a ridiculous sentence. I mean, I don't run around questioning the right of any country to exist because countries simply do exist. But in a sense, the way that criticism of Israel is received, interpreted, and described in Germany is sums up to, or like boils down to the belief that anti-Semitism is occurring, and as a result, for the opinions that critical Jewish people and critical Muslim people share often lead to the disproportionate punishment, more of Muslim people than of Jews, but 30% of cancellations or 35% of cancellations in Germany in the past year have been of progressive Jews, and that's a very high proportion considering what percentage we are of the population. So we are definitely punished for not having the right Jewish perspectives that Germany cannot accept, because Germany has an idea of a Jew that is very limited and in a way objectified. So I think it is possible that in the future the German media and the German politics will decide that because I am critical of Israel that I am an anti-Semite, because it doesn't matter to them. They decide what is a Jew, not me. They always have decided what is a Jew. And as a result, so because I have secondary citizenship, my primary citizenship is American, technically they will be able to use these resolutions and these legal amendments if they want to withdraw my citizenship. However, this is a theoretical fear, because of course it would look very stupid if they did this. And maybe we will come to a point in the world where everybody will be this crazy. We will have a Trump in the US and we will have the right wing in Germany, and then they will start to take away citizenship from Jews who criticize Israel and the German government because they will say they are anti-Semitic. It's possible that that's where we are going. Certainly, the current resolutions and actions by the government are very much the first steps down this road. Am I afraid of deportation? No. I always say in interviews, I'm going to stay in Germany and annoy them until they deport me. So in a sense, they will not be able to shut me up until they deport me. And if they deport me, I will figure it out, just like my grandparents figured it out and my great-grandparents.
Complicated. Bueno, no hace falta que la derecha esté en el poder, porque de hecho ya hoy tiene mucho poder y ellos instrumentalizan mucho el hecho judío, porque históricamente también lo han hecho y lo saben hacer, sin estar en el gobierno, llevando a veces a la democracia al límite de tener que tomar decisiones muy tensas. También es dramático lo que ocurre con los musulmanes, incluso peor que con los judíos, que están siendo, ahora ellos sí que están siendo ahora mismo deportados, ¿no? Hay mucho activismo crítico contra Israel también por parte de incluso personas de la comunidad judía o que nacieron judíos y de otras partes, pero realmente por otro lado la influencia de la derecha es tan fuerte que a veces leo cosas en los periódicos como que Israel no existe, sí o no, y cosas así de estúpidas. O sea que sí que se está notando de nuevo el antisemitismo, está allí, lo estamos viviendo, pero que todavía los musulmanes están pasándolo peor que nosotros. Tienen, por otro lado, el mundo alemán tiene una idea muy limitada de lo que es ser judío, que no todos son ortodoxos o ultraortodoxos, sino que son incluso, ateos o incluso no saben muy bien si tienen o no tienen una religión. Así que no me extraña que un día me pidan que me vaya, aunque sería muy estúpido porque soy una voz muy conocida. Y bueno, a lo mejor es posible que yo me vaya porque yo quiera, pero yo he dicho en los medios de comunicación que me voy a quedar en Alemania.
The last one, ¿qué conserva de aquella niña piadosa y educada para formar una familia?
I didn't understand this one.
What do you still have of that girl? You were very educated, very pious. You know what?
Yes, religious. Well, I don't think I was ever pious, but I think even as a young girl, one of the things that I say in the book is, I say in my community, they describe me as a child that always talks back. Mm-hmm. Because this idea is, as children in this world, you are spoken to, but you do not speak. And I always spoke back. And I think this is something that stays with me forever. I don't think I have anything of the pious. I think I was never pious. I think I learned a lot about life and the world from my grandmother. For example, I learned resilience from her. I learned a kind of mental independence, how to protect your thoughts from the thoughts of a majority or the thoughts of a mainstream. She helped me understand how one can be an island in society, and one can protect one's spirit from the corrosive influences of toxic social movements. And she gave me a lot of resilience, a lot of courage, a lot of strength. And so I'm using these qualities. But these qualities don't come from my religious background. They come from my personal connections, from my own family history, and from my experience at a young age to deal with adversity and to overcome challenges.
Cuando era una niña y lo tenía prohibido, siempre hablaba de todo y siempre contestaba, no me callaba nada. No me considero que haya sido nunca piadosa y aprendí, gracias a mi abuela, a ser mentalmente independiente, y eso me ayudó a ser un poco una isla desde el punto de vista mental, para que no me llegara todo lo tóxico que había alrededor. Y siempre he sido como una persona pues muy echada para adelante y con sus propios retos, y por eso no pude encajar en aquella vida.
So you were born in August.
Yes.
So that's why you were not so pious.
Yes, maybe. I'm a lion.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure
Thank you.
for us. Bye.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. It was complicated. I do this sometimes also. I listen to you